So in this video, I want to talk about how our village was created. So as I mentioned before, we each have our own village. And this village defines who we are as humans, our thoughts, our needs, our emotions. And what's still ironic about that, though, is that even though this is only our village, we don't actually choose everything that this village is made of. So for example, if we start with thoughts are actually automatic. We don't really choose what thoughts we want to think. As humans, we have what's called the negativity bias. And this means that we have about 5 negative thoughts for 1 positive thought. It's kind of crazy, isn't it? And especially when we think about how we live in a society that's obsessed with positive thinking and with, just choose happiness. It's just not the way that our brain works. It's not the way that we evolved as humans. So one of the things that we cannot choose is actually the kind of thoughts that we have in our internal village. And the other thing that we can't really choose is the emotions that we have. So thoughts and emotions tend to just show up. They tend to be villagers that come up to tell us a message, that share that message with us, and we don't really choose which villagers are showing up. It's a bit strange, but we're actually not as in control of our internal village as we would like to think, and also as I think society would like to make us think. And I feel like when we know that, our thoughts and our emotions are quite automatic, they're not really a choice, it can help us to bring a little bit more compassion and understanding to ourselves about maybe why we have certain thoughts or emotions. And then what we can choose is actually how we respond to them. That's always a choice that we do have. Another thing that I think we tend to be hard on ourselves about is our actions or our behavior as adults. And yet we know that a lot of our past experience is actually what's defining our current behavior as adults. So for example, if we had a very critical parent, we might have learned to adapt to that parent and to try to appease them, to try to make them happy all the time, to try to avoid being criticized. And when that happens, we might have a people-pleasing villager in our internal village. And this villager might still be taking over our village as adults, because what we had in the past, what adaptation we had, what villager showed up in the past to keep us safe, to keep us in connection with our parents who we needed to survive, can still keep going as adults, even though we no longer really need that villager in our adult lives. And so this is something that I find people find quite surprising when they first start doing work on themselves, when they first start looking at their internal villages, is realizing that actually so much is dependent on my childhood. So much is dependent on the context in which I grew up. It can also be bigger than just our immediate family. It can also be our culture. It can be just society, the societal messages that we had. But a lot of those things we didn't choose. We didn't choose the kind of parents that we had. We didn't choose the kind of upbringing that we had, or the society or the culture in which we were born in. And yet those have huge influences on how our village was built and how it continues to influence our behavior and our actions as adults. This makes me think of something that Paul Gilbert, who's the founder of an approach that I really like called compassion-focused therapy, he says, it's not your fault and it is your responsibility. And I really like that because it's very validating that, it's not our fault. A lot of what happened, we didn't choose. And it's at the same time as adults now, it is our responsibility to work with that and to make sure that we're able to not just act as victims or not take any responsibility for our actions, but instead to bring ourselves compassion about, I didn't choose some of the villagers who are in my village, but I can choose how I respond to them, whether I let them take over the village. And the more we can bring awareness to these different parts of us, to these different villagers, the more we can do that. But I would say the first step is to start by bringing ourselves the understanding and the compassion that, there's a lot in my village that I didn't choose. I didn't choose the thoughts that I have. I didn't choose the emotions that I have, because those are just part of what it means to be human. They tend to be automatic, they tend to be about survival, and not so much about making me feel good. That's just how it works, being human. And we also didn't choose the experiences that we had growing up, which then shape the way that we respond as adults. So it's just starting there by acknowledging that there are parts of our village that we did not choose, but that we can choose the actions that we take and how we respond to these different villagers, these different parts of us, is the first step to working with our internal village.